on the Asian Pacific as very important in many areas in terms of security, in terms of economics, and in terms of governance. This trip is to follow through with that and to establish Congress's role in it, in addition to which listening and learning from our colleagues, our allies, when I say allies, our friends in the area. The President's initiative in terms of economics, et cetera, is well known. And to that end, we visited Singapore, met with the Prime Minister, met with the President, a woman. That was pretty exciting for us. Mm-hmm. But most importantly, to discuss security, economics, and governance, to listen, to learn, to share views. Next, we went to Malaysia. We're again, in another country, welcomed in a very positive way. And I say when we were welcoming the President's initiative, because that is much of what we were representing. Next, we went to Taiwan. Again, security, economics, and governance. Had very positive meetings there, and I'll come back to that. Next, we went to South Korea to pay our respects to our 28,000 troops who are there and their families, to thank them for their courage and thank the government for their hospitality. We visited Panmunjom and again focused a great deal on the threat of North Korea in terms of their aggression, their possible aggression. And now we're in Japan. This morning we had a very impressive meeting, impressive from our standpoint, of the Prime Minister, congratulating him on his successes already in terms of security, economy, and governance. You may be more interested in, again, what the Chinese did while we were traveling, and we have said from the start that our representation here is not about changing the status quo here in Asia, changing the status quo in Taiwan. It's about, again, the Taiwan Relations Act, the U.S.-China policy, all of the pieces of legislation and agreements that have established what our relationship is, to have peace in the Taiwan Straits and to have the status quo prevail. To that end, as you see, the Chinese made their strikes, probably using our visit as an excuse. Let me close by saying this. The Chinese have tried to isolate Taiwan, keeping them most recently from the World Health Organization by not even letting their participation be on the agenda of the World Health Agency, whatever that makes these determinations. They may try to keep Taiwan from visiting or participating in other places, but they will not isolate Taiwan by preventing us to travel there. We've had high-level visits, senators in the spring, a bipartisan way, continuing visits, and we will not allow them to isolate Taiwan. They are not doing our travel schedule. The Chinese government is not doing that. Our friendship with Taiwan is a strong one. It is bipartisan in the House and the Senate, overwhelming support for peace and the status quo in Taiwan. With that, I want to just say how honored I was to travel with our delegation. We were more like 6 co-chairs of the delegation. We are coming to Asia. One of our members born in India, another whose parents were, that would be Mr. Raja Krishnamurthy, another member whose parents were born in South Korea, another who is Japanese American and proudly so. All of us representing the beautiful diversity of Asia in our states, and in my case, in my district. When it came to security, you'll hear from our members. Economy, we have the vice chair of the Ways and Means Committee to talk about that and trade and possible continuation of our discussions about a trade agreement in the region. But you'll hear directly from them, and I thank you for your interest in our trip. It's about, again, security. We never can have a CODEL unless we talk first and foremost about honoring our oath to protect and defend. Security first, economics tied in with that, as well as governance. In all cases, each of the countries we visited, we had very positive conversations and great respect for what they are doing in their countries, great candor in how we thought each of us could do better in our countries, and we were very honored to be received so well in the region. With that, I'm going to yield to the distinguished chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the House of Representatives, a champion for security, economics, governance, and trade, Mr. Chairman Gregory Meeks.
First, let me thank Speaker Pelosi for leading this delegation, for her commitment to this region and commitment to human beings and human rights, which has been a driving force in her whole career, but also a driving force in making sure that we are here today. And that is what this CODEL has been all about. It's about, as she said, dealing with security, economics, and governance, and I'll talk very briefly on the governance side, which is tremendously important. Because as our president has said, no matter where you go in the world, it is a question of democracy over autocratic government. And the countries that we visited on this trip, democratic democracies, where we, in regards to Taiwan, want the status to remain the same, not changing anything. We did not come to change any status in Taiwan, never advocated for that, but wanted to know and talk to all of our friends and allies and partners, which is important. And so on this trip, not one country that we visited said, you shouldn't have come. They all said, thank you for coming. They all said, we want to see you more. They all said, please, let's work together closely on all of the items that we had conversations about. We want you to be invested in the Indo-Pacific. That was the mission. And I'm proud to say, from the dialogue and the conversation that we've had, at every stop, the mission was accomplished. It was exactly as the speaker had envisioned. Had we not come, people would say, where are you? They want to see us in this region more. And that's why, as chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, it's been very instructive to me, because our committee over this time has had over 20 hearings dealing with this region. And we will have more. And we will focus legislation to let our partners, our allies and friends know that we will have their backs. And we will work collectively together in multilateral coalitions to make sure that the voices of democracy, as messy as it can be, will always be heard. And we will not be afraid to call out anyone who is in violations of human rights. I close by saying that if we don't speak up and speak out and silence, as which I'm sure that China would want, they surely do not want us to continue to talk about what's happening in Xinjiang and the Uyghurs, We're going to speak up and speak out for human rights, human dignity, and democratic process. That's what this trip was all about. And now it's my pleasure to present the chair of the Veterans Committee, the Honorable Mark Takano.
Well, thank you, Chairman Meeks. Thank you very much, Chairman Meeks. I do want to also thank Speaker Pelosi for leading this delegation to 5 very vibrant democracies, some that we call allies, some that we call partners, some that we call friends, different diplomatic terms. But they're all democracies. And the range of topics that we discussed, I was new to Singapore and new to Malaysia. I've been to Korea before. I've been to Japan, of course, many times. And I've been to Taiwan as recently as November of last year on a Thanksgiving Codel. The Chinese sent cease and desist letters to all of the members of my Codel. And, you know, we thought, frankly, we kind of laughed it off, dismissed it, because it is a common practice for congressional delegations to go to Taiwan, and there's a bit of ridiculousness that so much fuss was made over the Speaker's delegation going to Taiwan. But the Speaker reminded me of a quotation in her luncheon address to the Prime Minister of Malaysia. Let me see if I can get it right, and she might have to like step in to help me remember the words. But there's a famous line out of President Kennedy's, John F. Kennedy's inaugural address, where he exhorted Americans, you know, speaking to Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And then she reminded me that there was a second part. The following phrase was, to the nations of the world, ask not what America can do for you, but what we can do together for the freedom of mankind. And somehow that freedom of mankind portion of that speech just really caused my spirit to soar. Because when I think of visiting 5 vibrant democracies, what is it we are going to do together for the freedom of mankind? And in every one of the nations, the Speaker opened the space for me, who is not only chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee, who's very mindful about what our veterans fight for. It's just not the fight. It's not about just power. It is about it is not about power. It is about freedom. It is about what we can do together for the freedom of mankind. But you know, we raised the question of what is your country doing about LGBTQ equality? I'm co-chair of the LGBTQ Equality Caucus. I measure the health of a democracy by how well a democracy treats its most vulnerable citizens, its most vulnerable minorities. That is a moral question we always have to ask ourselves if we are a true democracy. In each case, we ask that question: what are we going to do, and what can the governments do to make sure that this vulnerable minority is protected? So I'm going to stop my comments there, and I'm going to turn it over to Susan Delbeni, my colleague, who's vice chair of the Ways and Means Committee.
Thank you, Chairman Takano. I am Susan Delbeni from the great state of Washington, and I'm vice chair of the Ways and Means Committee. It's great to be here, to be back in Japan, and be part of this delegation. While in many of the places we visited, is my first time visiting as a member of Congress, I've visited the region many, many times in my previous career in business and technology, and I know firsthand the incredible partnership that we have on innovation and an economic partnership throughout the region. A primary goal of our delegation, as the speaker mentioned, is economy and shared prosperity. And so we discussed the opportunities of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, of the U.S.-Taiwan Initiative for 21st Century Trade, and how we can use that to continue to build on the partnership that we have today, to strengthen supply chains, to make sure that we are in a strong position for prosperity going forward. We also discussed the CHIPS and Science Act that recently passed in the Congress and the important partnership that we have there in terms of not only supply chains, but in particular on core components like semiconductors, and the ability in that work there that we can build on to create ongoing innovative capacity throughout the region. Our goal economically to work together is shared prosperity, but also to use our innovative capabilities to address other critical issues for the region and for the United States, for the globe, addressing climate change, talking about energy security, and obviously what we do together economically to make sure that we have an economy that supports equality throughout the region. Thank you, and now I want to introduce a member of the House Intelligence Committee, a proud representative from Chicago, Illinois, Mr. Raja Krishnamurthy.
Good morning, konnichiwa. Thank you so much for allowing us to address you. And I am a representative from Illinois, and we claim total credit for Ambassador Rahm Emanuel and his achievements. I just want to make 3 quick points. First of all, throughout the region, we have been so heartened by all the countries standing with us and standing with the people of Ukraine in enforcing economic sanctions against Russia, as well as providing aid to the Ukrainian people as they defend themselves. The people of this region know more than perhaps anyone else in the world that when a dictator or autocrat invades another country or uses force with impunity and nobody responds, then that dictator or autocrat will do it again and encourage others to do the same. And so we are so heartened that all these countries, including Japan, Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan, and others, have stood with the people of Ukraine in favor of democracy. The second point I want to make is we are here as champions for the American people and the American economy. And I'm here as a champion of the Illinois economy and my own district. My district has the biggest concentration of headquarters of Japanese-owned companies of any congressional district anywhere in the country. And what we learned today in our discussions with the Japanese people, their leaders, is that they have made more than $750 billion of investments in America, leading to the creation of 1 million direct American jobs. Now, we encourage more of that, and we are convinced that through our visit, we're going to see more and more of that happen throughout America. And the third and final point I want to make is this, which is that our mission, our congressional delegation, is about peace. It's about peace and stability in the region and throughout the world. And so we are here, as Chairman Meeks said, to preserve and protect the status quo, to engage our partners and friends and allies, and to make sure that our people become more prosperous, and so do the people of the region. Thank you so much. And now I have the privilege of inviting my good friend and colleague, the distinguished representative from New Jersey, Andy Kim.
Thank you, everyone. I'll be brief here. I just want to reflect upon 3 lessons that I feel like I've come across over this trip. One is about the coalitions of these different nations, our militaries, our economies, but it isn't just transactional. It's not something you just measure based off of money and dollar signs or hardware, but it's personal. Whether that's my experience as a Korean American coming back for the very first time to the land of my mother and my father as a member of Congress, or Chairman Takano and I playing roles in seeing the names inscribed of both Americans and Koreans at the Wall of Remembrance that was just revealed in DC, and in every nation here in Japan as well. It's not transactional. There's something personal here. There's a relationship here that we act out of purpose, not just fear, and we work together in that way. Number 2, is that we come across and we take away from this trip the consequence of this moment. That the next couple years will shape the next couple decades, that we understand what's at stake, what each of our partners is facing, and understanding that this is a time for action, this is a time for resolve, working together. And the final lesson is about calm. Every single partner that we talked to was clear-headed, clear-eyed about what we face, resolute in their determination, but approaching things with that sense of calm, that sense of purpose, this understanding that what we're doing is completely normal. This is the business of our government, engaging one another, that we choose always dialogue before force, and working together to try to achieve that. And I'm grateful for these lessons, I'm grateful for this experience, and grateful for the incredible partners we have in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my colleagues. I can't help but thinking about how Mr. Krishnamurti took credit for the distinguished ambassador that we have, and then closed his remarks by saying Japan has he has more investment in your district than any district. Do you think those two things are related? I don't know. No, but we are very proud of our ambassador. He brings to this all the values of our country, a vision of prosperity for all. So when we talk about security, and as Mr. Takano mentioned, I was present at President Kennedy's inauguration. I was a student. Most of you weren't even born, but you've read about it in the history books. But the important point that he made is all working together. So this trip is for us to show our respect to these countries, to listen about how we can do the best possible job for the future. I'll just close by saying one of the most thrilling meetings we had were with young people, and they know they own the future. They know it's theirs, and they do own it from the standpoint of freedom, and from the standpoint of climate, and standpoint of respect for all people. So that was exciting, because that is our agenda, is always for the children, for the future, and again, coming here with respect, listening, learning, sharing our thoughts, honoring the commitment of our president to focus on the Asian Pacific. I think we have time for a few questions.
The delegation has agreed to take a couple of questions, so if you have a question, please raise your hand.
Thank you so much for your time, Speaker Pelosi. Just wanted to bring you back to Taiwan. So some have speculated that your trip to Taiwan was more about burnishing your own legacy than actually benefiting Taiwan, which has been left to bear the brunt of China's ire. What would you say to that?
Well, it's a ridiculous question. I mean, not your question, but the contention you have. Taiwan is one of the freest countries in the world. Don't take it from me. That's how Freedom House describes them. Their democracy, which was hard in the making. They didn't start out with a free and open democracy. They had to develop it, and that's a real achievement. Their economy is flourishing. We have seen the success of their semiconductor businesses and the rest, and we learned from their business people about how they developed that success and how we can work together to spread prosperity. And then in governance, again, LGBTQ, all kinds of issues. We met with the community members and heard their views about it. So this isn't about me. It's about them. It's about Taiwan. And I am proud to have worked over the years to showcase the concerns we have with mainland China relating to trade and their violations of our trade agreements, proliferation of weapons and delivery systems that are harmful to global security, as well as human rights. But this was about saying, let's celebrate Taiwan for what it is, a great democracy with a thriving economy with respect for all of its people.
Thank you. Let's get a question from this side of the room. Here we go.
I'm glad to see women asking the questions.
Good morning. Good Good morning. My
Thank
name
you.
is Akiko Inoue from Yomiuri Shimbun. I have a question for the speaker about China. In the reaction of China, it's conducting the military drill since yesterday. How do you think this visit will affect the U.S.-China relationship?
Could you repeat that?
How do you think
The U.S.-China relationship?
the visit?
The visit, well, our president, we are the House of Representatives, the Congress of the United States, and much of legislation, whether it's trade or appropriations and the rest, begins in the House of Representatives. And so we are one part of this. Our president has his communication with the president of China, and again, we are two big countries. We have to have communication among us. When I was a little girl, I was told at the beach if I dug a hole deep enough, we would reach China. So we've always felt a connection there. But the fact is, I have said it again and again, if we do not speak out for human rights in China because of commercial interest, we lose all moral authority to speak out about human rights any place in the world. We're trying to find our common ground. China has some contradictions, some progress in terms of lifting people up, some horrible things happening in terms of the Uyghurs. In fact, it's been labeled a genocide. So again, we must work with China on issues that relate to the climate crisis, being two of the biggest emitters, and we can learn a lot from China in that regard, but we also have to work together for some decisions in that place. So again, it isn't about our visit determining what the U.S.-China relationship is. It's a much bigger and longer-term challenge, and one that, again, we have to recognize that we have to work together in certain areas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Any colleagues want to
Let me
comment?
say something on that
Yeah,
real quick.
please.
Let me also just say briefly that anytime that the Chinese ambassador has asked to meet with me as chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, I've always been willing to meet. That will continue. That will not change. What also will not change is when we meet, I will talk honestly. I will talk and bring up the issues of which we need to talk to work together, but I'll also talk about those things that are problematic for me and our country. So it's not going to change how we in Congress, particularly in the House of Representatives, how we deal with China. It's going to continue. We've done nothing different than what we've been doing previously, and we will continue to do the same.
Thank you very
If I might
much.
just add that in the House and in the Senate, Democrats and Republicans overwhelmingly support the status quo in Taiwan. 25 senators, Republican senators, signed a letter supporting our visit, and there is legislation in both houses in support of that. So this isn't about my agenda or what do I think. This is about how we have candor in our relationships. Now, I think we have time for one more, isn't it? Right.
Okay.
It's up to these folks, whoever.
Thank you. Again, about Taiwan. Did Mr. Prime Minister Kishida, what did he say about your visit to Taiwan? Was he supportive? Was he positive about it? Or he wasn't too happy about it?
I would not ever divulge anything that happens in a conversation with our president or China's, or the Prime Minister of Japan. But let me say that we had a very positive meeting about our friendship. This is our best friend in the most important region and in our globe. And again, we listened with respect to what he had to say. We shared our views. And I don't want the Taiwan visit to deflect attention from what really our purpose was. We planned this a long time ago, and we couldn't go at one point because of COVID. And then a high-powered Senate delegation came. I don't know what the Chinese said about that. But nonetheless, we want the attention to be on the fact that what our president put forth is something that we all respect and admire in our Congress, and that we want to proceed in a way that has the fullest participation and intellectual resources of the countries that are affected. Many of them have friends on both sides of China and the United States. We didn't ask them to make any choices. We just wanted to be able to work together with them. Any comments for closing, my colleagues? No? Okay. Well, thank you all very much. Thank you so much.
If I could ask everyone to stay in your positions until the delegation departs. Thank you.
What did he say? Oh, stand in chairs.
They will stay. Has to be, they just have to stay.